What's that one doing?
That one?
Just for you?
Yeah, like I've got like 3 cams. This is for you. That's for like overall. And I wanted to set up another Canon, but
that's for you.
Yeah.
It's only framing you.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is just framing you.
Okay.
And it's on 85. And that one is getting like a
wide angle.
view. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I wanna like. It should sync.
Sync.
Yeah. So thank you for coming with us, Giuseppe, today.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us a bit about your background, like how has life been like, and how you got introduced to the VFX world?
Sure. So I started doing visual effects or computer animation when I was very young. I started becoming more interested into 3D computer graphics when I was about 13. Before then, I used to draw a lot. And then I got more interested into films like Jurassic Park and Toy Story. And so that's how I started, and that was about 23 years ago.
Have you been interested in photography from like your young days, or like when was the time you realized you want to go into photography or you want to start with photography?
So I've always done photography because my father was very keen on photography. So I was always looking at him taking pictures. And then photography became more of a mean to actually make money at the time, where there was very little money growing up. So while I was studying 3D and the computer graphics on my own, I'm self-taught. I was doing photography work as a wedding photographer first, then commercial photography after, to just bring some money home and buy more powerful computers to do more computer graphic.
Do you remember which was like your first camera you ever bought?
The first camera was my father's camera, really, and there was a Yashica.
Wow.
So there was a film camera. And then I jumped into the digital, I think it was a Nikon D70. That was my first digital camera, and I was shooting professionally with it for quite some time.
Which year would that be like?
I don't remember. I think it would be early 2000s.
Wow, that's pretty cool. When was the time like you realized you got developed an interest into like 3D space, and you thought, okay, let's transfer the 2D like photography knowledge into like the 3D space and get into digital arts?
Well, because like 3D arts also has a lot of lighting and art and visual development in it. So it just made for a natural transition to apply what I had learned in photography and cinematography into basically the digital world. For the first part of my career, I wasn't specialized in lighting. I was doing more like CG supervision. I started as a modeler, and then I did some rigging, and then I did CG supervision. And then only later on, I understood that I wanted to become a lighter and apply what I had learned from photography and cinematography into that.
Okay. So for students who are going or applying for position as a lighting artist, how important it is for them to understand the real world lights and cameras?
It's, I think, very important, because one of the biggest mistakes and more common mistakes that they see is that people are not used to actually place the lights in the real world. And so sometimes they place the lights in the 3D world in a position where you would never do on a set, because the light would be visible. And even if CG allows you to cheat a lot of things, that doesn't necessarily mean that the image will look good afterwards. So all that knowledge, it's been very, very important. The way we light a set on a cinema set teaches you a lot of tricks that can be applied into CG that you wouldn't even think otherwise.
And in terms of like skills or softwares, what exercises or like what all things a student should practice if he wants to become a lighting artist?
In terms of exercise, I always say that developing a small project from the start to the finish and complete and finish it, it's the most important thing, because especially at the beginning, you want to learn all the challenges that a project like a 3D development has. And it's very hard to finish something. It's very easy to start something. So I think overall, that's something that will teach you the most important things.
Can you tell us a bit about like one of your most interesting or favorite projects you've worked so far?
One of my favorite projects was Spider-Man Homecoming, because Spider-Man was my favorite character since I was a young kid, and I was drawing Spider-Man like all the time, right? And I just was obsessed with it. And so then working on a Spider-Man movie afterwards and actually doing the look dev for Spider-Man itself was really like like a dream come true.
Like, that would be dream for like so many students and like artists over here. Can you tell us about what goes in a day of a life of a director of photography? Like what all job roles he has to do, or what all things does he manage?
Sure. So in terms of direction of photography, when it comes to feature animation movies, so 3D animated movies, is slightly different from the work of a normal director of photography on its set. So essentially, I take whatever the art department has developed up until at that point, and I make it into 3D images, essentially. So I am the bridge between the 2D and the 3D, and I supervise the project with the client to make sure they are happy and develop the look of the project during this time, right? So working together with the art director and with the lighting supervisor, CG supervisors, to make sure that what we look at is actually what the client wants and that it looks good, hopefully.
That's pretty interesting. And what kind of challenges do you face in your daily job routine? What are the difficult patches where you have to be?
So I would say there is two main difficulties. The first one is obviously that the time that we have to produce something is very short most of the time, depending on if you are working on a feature film or an episodic for TV. You always have basically too little time to do everything, and there is always something else that you want to do. And so you have to learn with the years to basically balance that, and also not to be too attached to the final image, because you won't be able to necessarily make it as good as you wished. And the second difficulty is to communicate effectively with the artist what you want and with the client what you can achieve, right? The artist can be more or less experienced, and so letting them understand how something has to look like, it's a challenge, because at the beginning we don't have that visual culture that allows you to understand what is something that looks good and what is not. So you have to sort of drive them into making these images that you have in your head, trying to make them understand what is it in there.
Yeah, that's true. And can you tell us about if you're hiring for an artist, like a junior lighting artist, what will you consider as good points in an artist, and what would be the big red flags, you won't hire that person?
Interesting. So I always look for people that have an interest in problem solving and how things work. And I always look for people that actually have experience different kind of things. We were saying about photography, for example, or cinematography. Those are two extra skills that are good, but also people that understand how the color mix. So if they have a traditional background, it's also good. Lighting in 3D is also fairly technical, so there is also that part of things is not all creative. Arguably in animation it's more creative than visual effects, but it's still a fairly technical job. So if you have some programming skills, that's also good. It's not something to forget, although that is more on the technical side of things. But I think definitely people that have extra knowledge of how the light works, or what does it mean to actually place the light to tell a story, it's very important.
That's pretty cool. And in today's day, there are so many softwares for CG, like Maya, Katana, and if you consider other departments as well, there is ZBrush, Unreal, and so many software. So what would be your suggestion? How important would be for a student to learn all of it, or master just one or two of them?
Okay, I'll give you the example. When I started doing 3D, I started using 3D Studio for DOS. So we're talking about prehistoric software there, where you couldn't even see the wireframe moving. Okay, and then I switched to Lightwave 3D, then 3D Studio Max, then Maya, then Softimage, then RenderMan with other things. And in all these years, the knowledge that you need to make an image hasn't changed. It's only how you make the image change. So the software is only important to the extent that you know what you want to make out of it. So I would say if you want to get hired quickly, it's better to specialize in one software, so to know the best of it and to be effective with it. But in general, there is no need to worry about not knowing a software, because if you don't know that software but you're skilled enough and your portfolio shows that, they will train you to learn whatever is used in-house. And also a lot of companies have a lot of tools that are built on top of the commercial software anyway, and so that becomes just a base. So it depends a little bit on where you go.
Given all the advancement in with the AI, what do you think, how will be the lighting industry in coming years? What's gonna be the next revolution in the lighting industry?
So this might be controversial, but I think that the majority of the assets that are not fantasy or that are not custom made, let's say, will be scanned. And we will have a better and better technology and pre-made assets that allows you to basically build sets very, very quickly. I am seeing Unreal playing a very big role in that. And with the event of AI, AI will definitely integrate in the 3D world a lot faster than in 2D world, because the 3D world is a representation of reality. So once AI understands how these principles works, it's going to be very easy, for example, for ChatGPT to get into Unreal, load all the assets. If you ask, for example, to rebuild a set of a part of Finland or something like that, it will be able to look at all these assets, pick them for you and make a scene. And then it becomes your creative eye that has to steer that. So I think there is going to be a shift towards people that have to know more about how to do good things, nice looking things, and less people that know how to necessarily do those things. So I think the lighting shift that we will see, it's more towards this massive integration that is gonna happen, where you're gonna just tell the software, build me this or do that, and you will have this personal assistant that does the work for you. That doesn't mean that you won't need more expertise on technical matters or other things, but it just means that the creative process becomes more democratic in a sense that everybody will be able to actually go into a software and being able to do things. So now at that point, what do? Well, you have to be the guy that knows what a beautiful image is, because you cannot just count on your technical skills anymore.
Now I have a question, a different question. How do you think is Vancouver been evolved in last 5-10 years when you moved over here compared to the studios and all the projects going over here and the current situation and
Vancouver is a lot more expensive than when I started. So that's a challenge. And I mean, I say that because it's important for all the people that start to understand that Vancouver is a very expensive city right now. So you really want to work on that showreel and make it worth it so you can get the best possible job you can. And in terms of how it's evolved, the people that live here have an incredible chance, because all the major studios are basically here. And so it's such a good opportunity that if you are here studying or already have a foot in the door, basically, because you can have work permits, you can easily find a job if your skills are good enough. And we all understand that, we all have been juniors as well. So we understand that level. And it's not too hard right now to find a job if you have the right attitude and put the right effort.
What will be your suggestion to the students who are joining the course, enrolling into the VFX and animation course? What would be your suggestion to them? What should they prepare for?
I always say that the years between 20 and 30 years old are the years that you need to experiment with, right? So I was very lucky in my life. I'm very grateful for that I knew exactly where I wanted to be. And I pushed all the way. I'm still pushing because I know where I want to go. But I see a lot of young guys, a lot of students that don't have the clarity, and they're pushed in a lot of directions. And this is also a byproduct of the fact that, there is a lot out there. YouTube teaches you a lot of things, but which ones are the important ones? It's a whole different problem. So I always say that you enroll in a course, don't make a plan, but don't fall in love with that plan, and then see how things go and what you really like the most. Because really the most important thing, I believe personally in life, is that you have joy in what you do. You don't want to spend the majority of your day doing something that you don't love, or that doesn't make you feel proud of yourself, right? Or that doesn't pose challenges to yourself. Because every so often you're gonna have new challenges, and what you think you like today, you will definitely outgrow it in 10 years or even 5 years from now. So don't get too attached to finding the perfect path, just get to do as many things as you can. Because then when family comes or other problems in terms of limitations, that you cannot really work till 4 a.m. like I used to do, or sleep at work or things like that, because I have to go home to the family, right? That's where you realize that, you have to set boundaries. And so it's important that young guys understand these are the best years that you have, and you want to do the best you can with the time you have.
Last question for you. I don't want to take you a lot of time. So what are your future goals? Like, do you have any plans for like next 2 years or next 5 years that you're looking forward to something specific?
Sure. So there is two different ways for me. Like, one is teaching. I want to try and expand the teaching here in KPU, but just try to provide more value for the students with what I've done. So I'm working also on my own on a cinematography course for 3D artists, which blends the things we were talking about, right? So photography, cinematography, but for 3D artists. Because 3D, I think, will have a much bigger impact on multimedia than it has now, when the VR and virtual headset will come and become mainstream. So I think there's going to be a lot of people working in this industry, even more. And on the other side, I hope that I maybe can supervise a project as a director or an art director at some point soon.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Okay, good.